This is Pete Moore on Halo Talks NYC. I have the pleasure coming in from Tampa, natural pro bodybuilder, powerlifter, and a man who is the Mossad of nutritional sciences, Dr. Layne Norton. Good to have you on the show, buddy.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Very honored.
Awesome. So, you've kind of dedicated your entire life to basically calling bullshit on a lot of different modalities, science, food, what is in your body. So you want to give our listeners who don't know you just a little bit of background on how you got to here and, how you became an evangelist for good.
Yeah, I'll try to give the quick couple-minute spiel. So I describe myself as a meathead who loves science, or a geek who lifts heavy things, 6 of one, half dozen of the other, whichever you prefer. I got into lifting weights when I was a teenager because I wanted to stop getting bullied and I wanted to get attention from girls. Lifting weights didn't help with either of those things, but I developed a passion for lifting weights. And then when I got to college, I'd always known that I wanted to do something in the sciences. And I originally wanted to be a marine scientist, but the more I got into bodybuilding, the more I just was very taken with the human body. And so I switched my major to biochemistry, competed in my first bodybuilding show at age 19, was hooked. And then when I was about to graduate with my bachelor's, I realized I have no idea what I want to do with my life, and I don't feel like a professional. So I'm going to delay the real world for a few more years and go to grad school. And I was fortunate enough to really, I didn't put I'll be honest. I didn't do like this huge search. I just got kind of lucky that I found an amazing advisor at a really great university. So I went to University of Illinois for my Ph.D., perennially in the top 5 for nutritional sciences in grad school. And then the guy I was with, Dr. Don Layman, his specialty was protein metabolism. So I learned a ton about protein, did several research studies, published those studies. And then during that time, earned a pro card in natural bodybuilding, got into powerlifting. Turned out I was actually better at powerlifting than I probably was at bodybuilding. In 2014 and 15, I was the USA national champion in the 93 kilogram class. And then I actually set a world squat record, 2015 IPF Worlds. And that was all drug tested. And during that time, as I was in grad school, I was writing content before people knew before content had a word. So I started writing for bodybuilding.com back in 2002. Did that for well over a decade, had a video series with them, just was doing stuff because I loved doing it, but was building a following and didn't even really know what I was going to do with it.
That was before there was an influencer tag, right? Or
yeah. I mean, I was posting, I made, I want to say conservatively 100,000 posts on various bodybuilding message boards over 10-year period. So I always say now is like, when you're paying, when you pay somebody something they can do in 30 minutes, you're not paying them for the 30 minutes, you're paying them for the 10 years it took them to get there.
Yeah.
So I started a coaching company in 2005. Well, I started coaching in 2005. I didn't start a company until 2007, where I was just doing, one-on-one online nutrition coaching because I was getting so many inquiries from people who read my articles. And I just kind of started that to get some extra pocket change during grad school. And by the time I left grad school, that was a 6-figure business, and was really in demand. And then, once you get to a certain point where you're so in demand, you start thinking about scaling. And fortunately, I met my wife, who's right behind me. You can't see her, but Holly. And she's like, you really ought to train a team of people to like do some of this stuff. So we trained a team of coaches. We have our app, as David alluded to before we started. That's our automated version of things. We have a subscription website, and we're also working on a few other projects as well. So awesome. We have books. We do everything in the fitness space.
That's great. So, going back to your, when you're getting your PhD, how did nutrition get so complicated?
I don't really think that the big messaging doesn't need to be complicated. The problem is you're in an industry now where there's hundreds of thousands, if not millions of voices that are not just vying for your attention, but for your dollars.
Right.
And how can somebody stand out in that? Well, if you're, somebody who's evidence-based and you're an actual expert who's been through the ringer of grad school, you use words like likely, maybe, possibly, and you sound very unsure. And typically people who also go through that don't always have they're not usually good on camera, right? They're not charismatic. That's usually a kind of competing skill sets.
Mm-hmm.
So I think one benefit I had was from writing content early and being on camera early. I got good at that, or as good as I can be. And I was able to I consider myself a science communicator. So I'm able to take complex topics and relate them to somebody so it feels a little bit easier to understand. But I think what happens is when people wade out into this pool of, huge amounts of influencers, they kind of go, well, how can I get heard? Well, if you're doing it the right way, it's going to take time. And
Right.
people are very impatient. And so they start just making, very bold claims because they see that that's what gets attention. And I think that this is a big reason why there's a lot of confusion, because you have, extreme claims on all different spectrums, whether it's keto, carnivore, plant-based, intermittent fasting, you name it, where somebody's sitting out here saying, hey, there's actually validity to a lot of these approaches, but they probably work because they restrict energy intake and whatnot. I mean, that's not sexy enough. We can't have that,
Right.
I think that's a big portion of it. And I think the other big portion is people don't understand that there's a hierarchy of data, right? So people, if they hear a study get cited, they give it the same weight as any other study they hear, which is why people are so confused.
Mm-hmm.
And what I have to tell people is, no, there is weight to studies, right? So a great example, I just did a post about artificial sweeteners. A lot of people
Yeah, I
are
saw that. Yeah.
very anti-artificial sweetener. And, they'll say, well, did you see this study? And of course it's in, mice, or it's in a petri dish or whatnot. And hey, like my full disclosure, my PhD research was in rodents, and there's a lot of great things that you can do with a rodent model. But if it doesn't get validated in humans, it doesn't really matter. It's great as a proof of concept. But what I'll always say to people is what do you care about? Do you care about a mechanism, or do you care about the actual outcome in humans, right? So for example, people say, well, look, if you put it in a petri dish at a high dose, it does this to this specific gut bacteria. Okay, great. Well, what happens when we feed it to humans? Do we see their gut microflora change?
Mm-hmm.
And the answer so far really is no, we don't really see that. Another great example is people say, well, on a ketogenic diet, look, it increases your fat oxidation, which means you're going to lose more body fat. Okay, well, do you care about burning more fat, or do you care about the loss of body fat, which are two different things? Okay, that's fat oxidation is a mechanism. Loss of body fat is a phenotype outcome. So when we actually look at the human data, what it says is that when you equate calories and protein, you don't see differences in losses of body fat, despite differences in fat oxidation. And I could explain mechanistically why that is, but it's probably beyond the scope. But the point is, do you care about the actual thing that you should care about, or do you care about all this other little nuanced stuff, right?
Yeah.
And I think people get confused with the details and they major in the minors rather than, the big buckets. I mean, I always like to relate it to finances, right? What do you need to do to save money? You need to earn more than you spend. I mean, you can break it down however way you want. You can talk about crypto and NFTs and interest rates and all this kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, really, that's the big buckets, right? Now, there's a lot of different ways to get there, but that is the rule. And so I think, people get confused with the nuances of things.
Yeah. If you take a look at the role of the FDA or the lack thereof, have you seen a model where, there's a regulatory body, or is it really just going to be voices like you to say, hey, look, once you cut through this, even though there's a lot of noise, let's get back to the basics. You're basically putting fuel in your body. Here's what the fuel is. You don't put leaded gas into your fucking car, right? So there are reasons why you should think more fundamentally about what you're doing. And at some point you're going to understand that this is a very simple equation.
I think, the inclination is always to, when we see these sorts of things, to say, well, the government needs to step in and do X, Y, Z. Mm-hmm. And I'm probably going to surprise a lot of people with my answer, which is I don't necessarily think that's the best move. And it's because what is the government made up of? The government's made up of people, flawed people, just like every single one of us. So what you're saying, if you're going to have the government step in and decide who's giving out good information and bad information, that you actually trust them to be able to determine that more than you trust the average person. I don't necessarily trust that, right? Like I'm not sure that that is actually going to be a good thing. And there can be unintended outcomes to that. For example, what if, so I'm a Ph.D. in nutrition, but I'm not a registered dietitian. What if the government just gets frustrated and said, well, you know what, if you're not a registered dietitian, you just can't give nutrition advice. Well, what, am I supposed to go back and get my RD and do, 6 months of 40 hours a week of an internship? Because that would really suck for me, So I think that maybe there's a middle ground there somewhere, but I really do think that, like, I look at what I do in terms of calling out, misinformation, almost like a public service. Yes, it helps get me a following, which I can monetize, but I'm not making money off, calling nonsense out directly. I do that because I understand what it's like when I was 18 years old, reading the muscle magazines, and one article said this thing, and then the next magazine said that thing. And sometimes in the same magazine, it contradicted itself. So I know what it was like to be frustrated by that amount of diversity of information. And so, like I said, I kind of look at that like a public service.
Yeah. So, talk a little bit about, a lot of our audience are bricks and mortar health club operators that run group exercise studios, might be personal training. When you take a look at the impact that fitness exercise translates into more confidence, people becoming role models, how do you kind of look at that and say, well, you guys are charging $19 a month or $29 a month? Like, why are you giving this away when it's probably one of the 3 most important things in somebody's life?
Well, I think that there's probably a lot to unpack there, but I think, one, as sad as it sounds, if every single person who signed up for the gym used the gym, they wouldn't be able to charge $19.99 a month, because they would have to charge more, because their gyms would be completely flooded and there would be no
the fire guys would be there saying, like, everyone's got to stand in line or the velvet rope.
Exactly. So you can look at that as a bad thing of, these gyms charge $10 or $20 and people come in, they don't use their membership. Maybe, but that person probably wouldn't have signed up at all if it was, $80 a month or $90 a month or whatever it is. So at least we're getting them interested. At least we're getting them in the door. Right. And as far as like the impact it has, I mean, really, I'm a nutritional sciences guy. So my first love was nutrition, but I will tell everybody, people get so hung up on the nuance of nutrition, but man, you can offset a lot of junk if you just train. Like, honestly, the effect that resistance training has, the effect that aerobic exercise has, just moving, is really incredible. I mean, it's one of the only things a lot of medications that improve metabolic health do so through weight loss. Like they actually, like, for example, semaglutide, which is probably the most effective weight loss drug we have. People lose weight and they get healthier, they get metabolically healthier, but it's mostly because they lose weight. Whereas exercise, you don't even have to lose weight and you'll get more metabolically healthy, even without weight loss, with doing exercise. So it really is an incredible tool. But again, I think our society is so programmed, and I always say that I'm very aware of the problems. I'm not really sure what the solutions are, right?
Right.
Because sometimes it's just a people problem.
Yeah.
So, I can, within seconds, I can access pretty much any information I want in the world on here. I can order dinner. I could have flowers delivered to my wife. I could, I can manage my whole day right here. But if I want to get healthy, if I want to change the way I look, takes months and months and years. And so, most people go, well, what thing is there? What hack, what trick, where's the catch? Where can I do this thing that, it can make me, but we see that message, consistently with other industries too. I mean, we absolutely see it in the financial industry. That just was so much coming out. Now there's, even currencies are changing so quickly now. And obviously this is not my area of expertise, so I don't want to, wade into something, but there's nothing that's more appealing than the get rich quick scheme.
Sure,
and people want to believe that, because if they could believe that, hey, I can work 2 hours a week, on a laptop on a beach and make, 6 figures, then, people believe what they want to believe. But, maybe you can, but I haven't met many entrepreneurs that made, a really good living sitting on a beach on a laptop.
Yeah. So when you take a look at, there's been talk I've been doing this 23 years now in the industry, and a lot of bricks and mortar players have always said, yeah, I'm adding a nutrition component to what I'm doing. And some of them hired a certified nutritionist, and, they try and book appointments. Do you see, given what you've built on your end with the Carbon app and with, Outwork Nutrition, as well as maybe some of the coaching, that these clubs that I believe are the authority within their 5-mile radius that says, hey, look, let's not try and build this ourselves. Let's go and find best in class partners. Telehealth is probably 10 years accelerated from where it would have been pre-COVID. Yep. With adoption there. So do you see a positive convergence between, hey, we're actually going to bring this nutrition in and it's going to be part of your membership, or we're going to bring in experts, and if you eat properly, you take better care of yourself, and you understand the science, you're going to make better decisions?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of letting people specialize in what they're good at. Yeah. Right. Like I know where my wheelhouse is. I read a book called Good to Great by Jim Collins. And one of the things that really stuck with me was the hedgehog, like knowing what you're good at, what you have a knack for, and what you can make money with, and really honing in on that and trying to minimize everything else, And so for me, like I've said to people in my company, what I really want to end up focusing on is, my content, science communication, because that's what I think I'm good at, and my writing, because I think I'm a good writer. Yep. And I really want to minimize a lot of the other stuff, with regards to like managing the business, or, like, hey, this package didn't get delivered to this place, like, Layne, what do we do? Like that kind of stuff. Gotcha. But I'll even take it one step further. I think not just nutrition, but I think behavior management or behavior modification truly is hand in hand. And whether it's, having an in-house person who, is kind of a behavior specialist, or cognitive behavioral therapy, whatever you want to call it. I think that is also really needed, and sadly very devoid in the fitness industry. And I'll give you an example. We really make people out to be X's and O's. And the fact is that people are messy. That's one of my friends who's an entrepreneur, he said, what I wanted was employees, and what I got were people. And I've found that one out the hard way too. I think, when you look at it, let's go back and take a financial example. So we know how to lose weight, like regardless of what people say online. If you eat less calories than you expend, you will lose weight. So why is there so many people that are obese? Because it seems simple, right? Well, we know that if you earn more money than you spend, you will save money. And there's plenty of people who make enough money to not be broke. So why are a lot of people broke? Well, it's because it's not a head knowledge issue. It's a behavior issue. It's trying to rewire those circuits in your brain to where when you're out, with friends at a bar, you don't feel the need to, not just grab a beer, but buy everybody around the shots, or like depending on what you're, or when when you've paid off one car, you just go out and get a new loan on another car. Like, those are, some of those things are behaviors, and the same goes for food, right? It's not just, food is not just what you eat. It's a part of our culture. When was the last time you went to an event that didn't have, food? It always has food. Mm-hmm. And if you look at, like, for example, dinner plates from the 1800s, they're like this big. And now, then they're gradually expanding, right? And they've even shown that, like, for example, the contrast between the plate and the food you're eating can influence how much you eat. A lot of this stuff is subconscious. And I think, one of the really big gaps we need to bridge with the obesity crisis is acknowledging that one, there is a personal responsibility component here, but also there's other factors that play into this that are subconscious, genetic, whatever have you. We know, for example, that obese people get a much greater reward from food than somebody who's lean or non-obese. So while, yes, they need to eat less than they expend, it's not as easy for them necessarily. And we also know that obese people are more likely to have, for example, trauma in their past. I think there was a study on obese women, and I think it was something like 60 out of 100 had some form of like sexual assault in their past. And many of them actually said that they purposely became big because it made them feel safe.
Interesting.
So,
wow.
It is a calorie thing, just like, finances are a saving thing, but there's a lot with what's going on under the hood that needs to be untangled. And I really feel that's where like behavioral therapy needs to come in. And we have structured like our writing to encompass a lot more of that over the last few years.
So some of the things that irritate me is when I'm in the airport, which I travel a lot, and they've got like a M&M sharing pack. Yet I'm traveling by myself and I'm not sharing that with anybody. I just got 2 times the amount of sugar loaded. And then I get like, I'm thinking I'm eating I'm going to just get the trail mix with the, M&Ms and raisins and whatever else in there. And then you look at the back and it's like fucking 12 serving sizes.
Yeah.
And then like take out your multiplication map for 12 and realize like I just down like 120 grams of sugar, which is what? It's like 60 teaspoons of sugar. No, not 60, like 30 teaspoons of sugar or something crazy.
Right.
So, and I know you're not anti sugar, but I feel like, is there a serving size issue? Like, has anyone put the pint of Ben and Jerry's back 3 other times and it's for 4 people? Like, not sure if that's like helpful or not.
So there is some government crackdown on that a little bit now.
Oh, good to hear.
When you're getting, like, for example, it used to be like those 20-ounce Mountain Dews.
Oh, I just referenced this today that there's 24 cubes of sugar in that in a podcast video we were doing. Yeah, it's shocking to me.
Right. So they used to be able to, like, on the label, you could put whatever serving size you wanted, right? So they said, well, serving size is 8 ounces, even though their individual servings are 12, right? And so, there was 2.5 servings in a container. And now the government has kind of come out and said, well, if you are going to have something that is an individual package, it needs to be 1 serving. Like, you need to reflect what people are actually eating. And I always tell people, like, this is a big problem. People are horrible estimators of their food intake. Horrible. In fact, the majority of people underestimate by 30 to 50%. And I always tell people, if you ever doubt me, go weigh out a serving of peanut butter, or go weigh out a serving of ice cream or cereal. You want to see something depressing, you will be depressed, trust me. And you'll realize that, hey, when I have a serving of ice cream, it was actually more like 3. Or when I have a serving of cereal, it was more like 4, like when you fill your bowl up. So there definitely is something to that, but it's tough because there's a few different ways to look at this. And a lot of people have kind of put the blame on the food companies. You're creating these hyper palatable foods, whatnot. And the libertarian entrepreneur in me says, but they're just giving people what they want, right? Like, they're just creating a product. People want the product. So they're what does every business do? How can we get people to buy more of our product and more frequently? Right.
Yeah. Like, I think it was there was like a famous Alka-Seltzer marketing woman that said, how are we going to double sales? We'll just put two drops of Alka-Seltzer in there in the commercial, and then they doubled their sales, so
right.
I hear you. Yeah. And then you go to Costco and like everything's bulk and you're like, oh, that's great, I got a deal on it. Well, you haven't got a deal because you got way more calories in your shelving that you thought they did.
It's funny you say that, because the first time my wife went into a Sam's Club, I think we got like through 3 aisles, and I'm doing the math in my head, and we're already in like $500. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
And I'm like, if you don't want to spend more than $1,000, we got to slow our roll. We don't need all this right now, because that is how they get you, right? But it's difficult because, and I relate this to kind of like news, right? Like, everybody loves to blame the media for a lot of the stuff out there, and I'm no big fan of mainstream media. However, what I'll tell people is they're just giving you the stuff you're clicking on. because
Right.
if you would watch good news, if that would be what got clicks and shares and whatnot, then they would stop, because they are capitalists. They want to make money. So if you started watching the good stuff and you stopped watching the bad stuff, guess what they would stop doing? Bad stuff, because you vote with your dollars.
That could be interesting to see if, like, for every, car chase, there's like some kid getting, like scoring a goal in Little League, or, and like toggle between the two, and let's mix it up here.
I mean, I've been at this, I'm 40 years old now, and I've, at every single age group, there has been something that is going to be the apocalypse. Ever since I was a kid, and I always I think that this is a people problem, that our brains head towards the negative, and so like I tell people, like, listen, the great thing about social media, like, I don't watch the news. I don't. The great thing about social media is you can curate your feed. If you start liking and sharing a bunch of bad stuff, guess what you're going to get more of? You're going to get more bad stuff. So I, follow accounts I follow a couple of news accounts. I follow obviously nutrition and training stuff. And then I follow stuff that makes me feel good, because I don't need to be filling my brain with negativity all day.
Yeah, I hear you. So, so you're 40. I'm about to turn 50. When I turned 40, I said to myself, I'm not going to make any more mistakes, because I basically have seen every movie, right? And I know what the sequel is going to be. Subsequent to that 40, I've definitely invested in some companies that I shouldn't have. I took out some deals I shouldn't have. And everything's a continuous improvement. You've been a successful entrepreneur. It sounds like you're pretty laser focused on, hey, here's what I'm good at. Here's maybe not what I need to be good at, or, I don't need to learn that, because it's better to optimize my strengths than it is to kind of, I could get people to tuck in and fill in my, weaknesses or areas of opportunity that I don't need to be the guy to do it. So how do you think about being an entrepreneur? Obviously, whatever your feed is, you see all these companies raising ridiculous amounts of VC money. No one really knows, but that VC money is above the entrepreneur's money. So they're getting their money back before the entrepreneur ever sees a dime. And these valuations sound crazy, except they get their money first, and you're kind of sitting there hoping that this is executed well. And you take an entrepreneur and say, oh, here's $100 million that's never done this before. I'm not sure the return on investment on 100 million is a good thing to put in their coffer. So how do you think about, you live in Tampa, you're working there with your wife, you got a thriving business, you got an authority in what you're talking about. How do you define success?
My business advisor actually asked me this today. So I'll give you my really broad definition of success, which is I'll be working because I want to and because I like it, not because I feel like I have to. So that would be my definition of success. And I don't think we're actually that far off of where we're at now. I mean, to be quite frank, I came from a lower middle class family. I got bullied growing up, told I'd be nothing. I've already done way more than I ever could have dreamed of as a kid. So for me, this is all gravy. If it ever gets better than this, I mean, I'm good, but I would love it to. And I'm obviously a very driven person and want it to. But, I look at everything right now as kind of gravy.
Got it. It's a great answer. So when you think about, I'm sure you got 100 ideas a day, like we do, and you're like, oh, this makes a lot of sense. Let me go and hustle and do that. Do you pull the reins back on yourself? Is this business advisor saying like, hey, look, I'm going to listen to this guy? Like some politicians, not having to name them because it's obvious, if they just had one voice in the room that was like their real conciliary, they'd probably be a lot more successful because there's a governor on what they do. And I think entrepreneurs are the same way. So how do you kind of think about that? About, hey, it's a great idea, but you know what? Do I need to be the guy to do that? I don't know if I need to.
So yes. And actually, in my company, I'm probably the biggest skeptic. So I good. Actually,
that's not normal usually.
Right. So I actually need somebody to kind of push me a little bit. In fact, my wife and I are a great team. We have a lot of conflict sometimes because we're very different. She is the ideas person. Let's do this idea. Let's execute on it now. Like, this is a great thing. And then I'm the one like poking holes in it. Like, yeah, but have you thought about this? And who's going to manage that? I don't know about if we have the bandwidth for this, And so at first it was really tough for us because it did create quite a bit of conflict. And I think like actually having a couple of business advisors who really helped us a lot because they've helped us understand each other much better, and understand that like me being a skeptic is not me. Like I've said, I'm not saying it's a bad idea. I'm just saying it's not something we need to execute on right now.
Yeah.
So I think one of the things that I've gotten better at is saying no. And I think that that's a huge thing. Like it's the most powerful word in your vocabulary. And just, just saying, no, I'm not doing that, or if we're going to do it, then it's going to be outsourced to somebody else. Right.
Yeah. No, we got that. I got that issue where, you're in the business of helping people, right? I'm in the business of helping people. And if you want to get a deal done and you call and say, I'm trying to accomplish X, Y, Z, my gut says, let me figure out a way to help you. Sometimes you can't help everybody, and you spread yourself too thin. One of my friends back at business school said to me, like you're the middle of the five people you talk to the most during any week. Like you're like in the middle, So if you think about, you got your business advisor, you got your wife, like where do you find, either the positivity, or where do you find maybe somebody who's a critic or somebody's going to challenge you? Like, how do you think about your like top five?
I actually really think that when it comes to business, I'm probably the worst critic in the company, to be quite honest. In fact, we did a test. It was called ThinkX, which I was actually pretty impressed with it. And some of these tests, I kind of take them and I'm like, meh, but this one I was pretty impressed with. It said that I had a high degree of skepticism, which I actually think is my scientific background.
Sure.
I've just seen so much stuff not pan out that I go, yeah, I'm not sure about that. I wonder if it's bullshit.
Mm-hmm.
So there's that. I think it's great that, my wife is so involved in the company because she's the ideas person. She is the person that's always, how can we improve this? How can we make it better? How can we expand it? There's that. And then our director of operations, Samantha, she's fantastic because she's kind of like Holly, but also with a little bit of me in there in terms of she is kind of thinking about some of the things that, okay, well, how are we going to manage this? How are we going to do this? That sort of thing. So she's a good go between. And then our business advisors, our main business advisor named Don Russell. He was a really successful investment banker back in the 90s. And now he just kind of like, I think he's part-time CEO of like, I don't know, half dozen different companies. He just, this is his like retirement funsies sort of thing.
Yeah.
So talking to him, he's just got a very, he's kind of seen it all, done it all. He's seen, people get sued for hundreds of millions of dollars. He's seen the most stressful things that can happen in business. He's seen the highest of highs, in terms of, billion-dollar deals getting done. And so, just having that kind of like steady hand and guide to just, especially me when I'm like, kind of like having some anxiety or freaking out about something that's going on, and say, hey, it's going to be okay. Here's why. It's that's really helpful for me.
Yeah, that's great. So one other question, just on the entrepreneur side of your thinking, you can help a lot of people by continuing to scale your business. You can put it into different languages. You could work, 18 hours a day. When I started our advisory business, they're like, hey, why don't you open up an office in Hong Kong and one in London? Because I'm like, I want to sleep and like I don't really want to be on an airplane, right? So I was trying to like create the life that I wanted around the business model that I wanted to pursue. Having, I see your background set up there, you're in Tampa, you got warm weather, you got a nice headset. How do you kind of say, we could do that, but like, what extra do I get? And the reason why I want to get your opinion on this is because we get a lot of entrepreneurs that come in and they say, hey, I got 5 spin studios. I want to open up 500. I'm like, do you want to go to your kid's Little League game? Do you want to have like issues with your family? Do you want to work for a private equity firm that's going to be texting you asking like, how come you only sold 104 memberships? You said you were going to sell 110. How do you kind of think about the opportunity and the return? And then also kind of somebody like messing with like, hey, this is my life and I'm going to run it the way I want to. And I'm not taking in investors because I'm not seeding that to anybody.
Yeah, I think that's really point. We actually had a venture capitalist firm offer us, a good amount of money for carbon. It was, we just, not that we would never consider that, but it was just, we didn't feel like it was the right deal for us. And we felt like we wanted to bet on ourselves. And I think one of the things that I've been very adamant about is I would not feel like a success if, even if I helped a ton of people and I, made hundreds of millions of dollars or whatever it is, if my own kids didn't say, hey, dad was there for me, or, my wife say like my husband was a good husband, like that would feel like a pretty big failure to me. And I just think about, the story I heard about Steve Jobs, who, there's no question he changed the world, but a lot of his family wouldn't have anything to do with him. And to me, that would just, absolutely no disrespect to Steve Jobs, because I think in many ways the world's better off for having had him in it. But, I had a friend or a client actually who was a tax attorney, and he watched people, he did estate planning. And he's like, I've watched a lot of people die. He said, you know what nobody says to me? Oh, I wish I just worked 10 hours more. I wish I just made 100 grand more. I wish it's always, I wish I'd spent more time with my family. Sure. I wish I'd enjoyed my, my experiences more. I wish I'd traveled more. I wish I'd created more memories. I wish I spent more time with my kids, that sort of stuff. And so I absolutely want to be successful and leave a big impact on the world, but I don't want to do that at the expense of the people who are closest to me.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well said. I think that's a great, kind of denouement or ending of our discussion here, because I think people really need to realize that, hey, look, we're outside of COVID. Things are going to come back. There's going to be a lot of opportunities in front of you. Pick the ones that you really want to focus on that feel right. Research it, and understand, or fast forward to say, hey, what's my life going to look like? And do I like what that picture is? And you got plenty of entrepreneurs, and, everyone says, oh, private equity, this, venture capital, that, but, it's not, you only read the highlight reel. You don't hear the other parts of guys negotiating their employment agreement, or, shares getting squashed down, or valuation tables changing and they didn't really know what it was. And so I think, having you on as a successful entrepreneur, balanced, giving out authentic and accurate information is great for the Halo sector. Look forward to meeting you in person at some point. And, we're big fans of what you're doing, and we appreciate you coming on the show.
Oh, thanks for having me on. I enjoyed it.
Awesome. All right, man. I'll see you in the gym.
Sounds good, guys. Thanks for having me, and let me know when it goes up.
Yeah, we'll have probably a couple of weeks. Thanks, bud. Appreciate you. Good
Sounds
talking.
Great.
All right.
Thanks, guys.
Take care.